Hooray!
Hello. Welcome to Anxiety, Depression, and the Real Questions.
Woo!
I am Kimmy.
And I'm Claire.
And life's happening.
It is indeed, my dude.
The world seems to be still falling apart. I just ate burned broccoli.
As one does.
I'm trying meal prep, and because Tyler wants to do meal prepping because it's going to be cheaper. And I wasn't paying attention to the pan that had the broccoli and the cauliflower in it enough. And I was like, I have it on low. It'll be fine. And then it burned it. But I'm also too cheap to throw that away. So
for sure. I did the same thing recently with an egg sandwich. It was just completely black. And I was like, I'm eating it. Just
adds flavor.
I don't have
It's fine.
I was like, scrape. No, it's fine. I'll just eat it. It'll taste burnt. It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Burned is a flavor. It's fine.
Yeah, like a burnt marshmallow. People like that.
Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine.
People like that. I don't, but people do. Yeah. No, I'm super tired today, so if my voice seems low energy, that's why. I'm literally laying in bed as we speak.
You look cute, though.
No, I don't. I look like...
Yes, you do.
I don't know what I look like, but it's not good. Like a pale orb. Like a white circle. It's not good.
I mean,
like an alien squish ball. Like a sick bald guy. I need to stop talking. You say something now.
I don't know what to say to that, honestly.
That's fair. It's just it should show the sort of mental state that I'm in.
You're just exhausted. You're all zoomed out.
I am. Oh my god. All day orientation for 2 weeks is too much on Zoom. Can I just say that?
2-week orientation too.
Through Zoom. It's just not great. Just not great. And so I'm exhausted. I hate Zoom now. And now I'm trying to actually prepare all the materials to give to my students. And so it's like, no, after all that orientation, no, you're still not done. You still have to do all this stuff on your own.
You still have 15 weeks left of...
Oh, yeah. But just by the end of orientation, you're still not prepared to teach, which I just think is ridiculous because it was 2 weeks long. But that's fine. It's not like I'm bitter.
Welcome to academia. Again, welcome back to academia.
Yeah, welcome back to this. So here we are.
Future Dr. Oldham, welcome back to academia.
Hi.
So that's how you're doing.
That's how I'm doing. So yeah, I'm kind of grumpy. I'm at everything.
See something. It's okay. Tyler's been grumpy this week too. And I mean that in the most loving way. I love him so much, but he's been so grumpy this week.
Well,
I was finally just quit.
I think starting school just really makes everybody kind of. So.
Yeah, because this was the first week for tech, and it's his last semester, so he's got he's hardcore done. Senioritis.
Yeah, senioritis is real.
He doesn't want to be here anymore. He's hopefully basically already got a job lined up, so he's what's the point of this?
Oh, for sure. I agree. Yeah. So what are we talking about today, Kimmy? Tell us.
We're talking about the two-party system.
Ooh,
and how it's crap.
It is. Yes.
Especially, I would say the last 2 elections have kind of shown us just how crappy the two-party system is.
I mean, because we weren't old enough to participate in
2008.
Yes.
Or 2012.
Yeah, but 2016, I would say, was our intro into the election world, and I think everyone agrees. That is one thing everybody can agree on, that was not good. Well, I don't care if you agree with the result or not. That was not good.
I also absolutely hate the mindset of, well, I don't want this person, so I'll just vote for the other person.
Yes, but like also what else are you supposed to
What else?
do?
Exactly. What else can you do? Like that's.
So, okay, that brings me to my thought. So I told Kimmy before we started that I had a thought because of this video that I watched. Um, that like now this has really shaped the way that I see like voting and stuff. And like kind of how messed up some things are. And it has to do kind of with the same mindset as the Electoral College, but it's not a suggestion that we get rid of it. It's this
Mhm.
idea of, and some places do this, it's the idea of ranked voting.
Hmm.
So here's the thing is that basically you go in and you look at all the different people and you say, here's my first option, here's my second option, here's my third option, whatever. And
Mhm.
if your
Mhm.
first option ends up having like not enough votes to like work, it goes to your second option. And here's the thing, like if they're out of it, if they're out of the running, it goes and it
That's
picks your
kind of
second person.
that's
So
interesting.
here's what that does. Apparently it's just this really simple like fair idea. um
And that way your vote isn't wasted.
what exactly what this does, there was a name for it that I've like now forgotten because my brain is dead, of this idea of like a certain thing that happens where we don't obviously like vote for we're trying to give our vote to what would actually like count the most. So that's why third
Mhm.
party can never win. And maybe it like can never win because there's not enough people. But also this idea of like if a third party is introduced, it then splits like the Democratic or Republican vote depending on what it is, which
Mhm.
automatically gives it to the other party.
Mhm.
So people then avoid like there's just a lot of messed up stuff in the way that it currently is that the ranking system would solve.
Well, and
Because you could say like, I want this like more moderate like whatever person like third party guy, but like if that doesn't work out, fine, I'll put Donald Trump or something. Like if you're a Republican.
mhm.
And then that way it would also give a much more accurate representation of what
Of
people
like,
are actually voting for. And if you're actually free to vote for what you're voting for, like, I honestly think that maybe it won't end up being so extreme
an awful.
because even moderate people end up having to pick extreme people. So then, therefore, everyone thinks that everyone else is extreme. Therefore, you think that you're the only sane one, and everyone starts alienating other people. It becomes us versus them more and more and more. And you feel like in order to beat that extreme person, you have to get another extreme person, but that's not what everyone actually wants. And it just explodes and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which is why everyone thought for a while, or at least I did, that this upcoming election would be better than last time, but it's actually just worse. It just gets worse over time.
and and people are just getting more and more hostile and hateful.
And so it really is like this two-party system, because of this voting method that we have, is just like exemplified through it, like exponentially like put into place. And that actually, I don't think that actually represents American politics like truly, like the American perspective. Maybe it does, but I don't think it does. um and like also that it doesn't give power like to the people, and it
And
makes
I
it to where we have to go for an extreme person and go for a political party, when honestly I think the best way to live your life is to not be fully ingrained in either, because I don't think that like I just think they're both flawed, because of
I
course
think
they are.
well because there's never just two sides. It's
Exactly.
not possible to just have two sides. That's not how the world works. That's not how humans work.
Hmm.
And I grew up Republican. My parents have always been Republican because a lot of times like they just align better with the ideals and the
Yeah, my parents are,
beliefs that we have.
yeah, more conservative as well.
And like I stayed that way for a long time, and I still lean more Republican. But here's the thing, though, like I've about decided that both parties are just way too crazy.
Oh, definitely.
because I disagree with like 90% of what Democrats do,
Mm-hmm.
but I also disagree with about 80% of what the Republicans do now.
So you're just
Because I'm
slightly
like,
more Republican.
yeah,
But really, you
it's
don't
like
politics. Yeah.
I just don't like politics because they're all messed up. They're all corrupt. They're all crazy. They're all just like, well, the other side is evil, and it's like, no, the other side is not just pure evil. The other side has human beings, some of which are trying to do what's good for people. The others, you know, there are some that are just like, yes, power, give it to me.
Mm-hmm. And also,
But it's
there's
just
system
awful.
is in place to where like people can't move and do what they're trying to do, and it just ends up being like a big stalemate of awfulness.
And in my opinion, all of it, like the entire two-party system, is literally just built to create division.
I mean, I would agree with that.
Because if you look at it, the way that politicians and the way that people on each side frame the other side for their like followers and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
they demonize them. Republicans demonize Democrats and Democratic voters, and Democrats demonize Republicans and Republican voters. Because if you look at it, you know, well, the Republicans are like, oh, well, they hate babies and they hate this and they're not for patriotism. And then Democrats are like, oh, well, they hate other races and they hate this and they hate that. And it's
Yeah,
like, I would say for both sides, 90% of that is not even true.
I would hope not. Yeah, I mean, I do think that
Because,
like our policies do speak to things, but yeah, the way that we're interpreting it, I don't think was the original intention. And I also think that so this kind of goes into what our topic was from last week about teaching, or was that last week?
yeah, that was last week.
About teaching, changing your worldview. So one
Are
of the
you
things
okay?
I know, oh my God, I'm not. One of the things we talked about in like our classes was this concept of stasis theory, which is the idea of arguments being on different levels, and that ultimately you have to figure out what level is your like I don't want to use the word opponent, but go with me, your opponent using, like what type of argument are they making, so that then you can address that person's argument on that same level instead of coming at it from a completely different point of view, and that way you both end up just talking right past each other. And so stasis theory, just to give a little bit more context on that, it's the argument that it's the theory that arguments are on the four levels of fact, definition, quality, and policy. And so if someone is arguing like for a quality argument, like they're saying like, oh, this is a good thing or a bad thing, like they're attributing values to it, while the other side is still stuck on the fact level, like they don't even, no one can even agree on like what the facts are, like coronavirus, for example. Then someone else is just like, it's just the right thing to do, but the other people are like, I don't believe it's a fact. That means that literally we're not even arguing on the same plane. How are we ever going to reach any sort of conclusion when the person isn't even matching you? So the levels are way off. And so I was thinking about that in terms of politics and policy, is that a lot of times when someone like talks about the other side or talks about their own perception of a specific issue, it's that they're not even saying the same thing. And the best example I can think about it is the abortion one. So sorry, like for getting into
that's the one I
abortion,
always
like
used with.
very sorry, but yes, like I know it's a heavy topic, but it's a really good example.
It's very clear there are more than two sides, but there are two very vocal sides that you
Right.
can work with.
So one side is saying women's bodies matter. Women have the right to control their bodies. The other side is not saying women's bodies do not matter. Women do not have the right to control their bodies. That's not what the other side is saying. The other side is saying
everyone's important.
Like all life is sacred, and therefore like baby, like pre-born. That's not the word. Sorry,
Well,
unborn. There we go.
life at conception. They're saying life at conception.
Conception. The other side is not saying, or maybe they are like, they're like, oh, there's a debate of the facts of life of conception, or a debate of like definition. But they're also saying like, they're also not saying, no, not all life is sacred. You know what I mean? Like, so one side is being like, life is sacred. The other side being, women have right to their bodies. They're not arguing the same thing back and forth.
The way I always framed it for my students was like, okay, if we're talking about fact level, let's say they agree all life is important. Like all human lives are important and valuable and precious. But then when you get to to definition, they're defining life differently.
Yep. Amen. So,
like they're defining what human life is.
How are we ever going to get to the same page? So that's like such a good one. And like, you just think about that and like how that's the case pretty much in every political debate when through the lens of Republican versus Democrat.
And I think that a lot of times I think that both sides in a way they purposely use rhetoric that will continue that. I think a lot of times they're not looking to find agreement.
We're not looking. You're so right.
They're looking for, right. I want to beat them. I want them, whatever. They're wrong. They're evil, whatever. They're not looking to find agreement. That's the and I think that's the problem with 90% of our rhetoric nowadays anyway. In conversations and debates and all of these things, when you get into a conversation with someone that turns into a debate or an argument, it's not looking to, I want to understand where you're coming from. It's, I want to tell you that I'm right.
Yeah.
And that is, I feel like, a very strong root in the problem. Because we've lost the ability, and this is just, when we were teaching, this was like a thing, but there's always more than one side of the story. You always have to listen to the opposing side. The problem is a lot of that was hypocritical.
Yes.
Because most of the time, it is not our instinct to practice that. We get defensive and we want to say, well, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Let me show you.
Yeah. Almost like
I do it.
Almost like an identity thing. Like when someone, because that's also another problem with the two-party system, is that you take on that like identity of like, if I'm saying, if you're like very us versus them, like I was saying, like, oh yeah, like all Democrats or all Republicans are stupid. You're like, actually, no. You're like I have to defend myself here. Like, this is why I did what I did. I'm like voted who I voted for. Like, I just believe this. I'm not like I do. You're just constantly like, you get so defensive because it's such a thing in our culture to like have it as a part of our identity.
And our instinct is also to insult. We are way too quick to insult and attack rather than slow down and listen.
Oh yeah,
because if you think about the debate that's going on right now, it's like, especially, and I just typically see the attacks on Republicans. I don't know why that's what pops up on my social medias. But it's like, hey, Republicans hate this, and this. Remember that Republicans are like this. Remember that Republicans are just awful people. And I'm like, while some of these may be true about some people, I'm not denying there are horrible people in the world. There are horrible people that are racist. There are horrible people that think that, white supremacy is a cool thing. There are people that think killing people is just like a cool fun thing to do. There are people that think, that just like cops have a free pass at, just doing whatever. But there's also, that's not a way to get people on your side. It's not a way to get people to see your point of view by insulting them. Because if you just say all Republicans, then anyone who identifies with the Republican Party you've now insulted their morals, their intelligence, their entire, like,
that's isolating.
It's isolating and you've immediately turned them against you. They no longer are going to listen to anything you have to say. They're gearing up for their argument, for their rebuttal.
Which means that you're not actually trying to persuade them to see your side. You're picking a fight. Like, you just want to make your point, and maybe you think that only people like you are listening. So you actually are talking in a bubble, like, you
Echo
just
chamber.
expect people to agree with you. You're not actually looking for productive debate or discussion. And so therefore that is like what is like that's not productive. Like, and why would we just put ourselves in a bubble of one way of thinking? Because in like Kimmy was saying, she has like fallen more, like we said, it's not truly a label, but she's fallen more on the side of Republican. I would say I've fallen more on the side of uh Democratic Party. Because of just different things. And I do feel this constant need to like pretend, like, not pretend, sorry. Let me see if I can think this through.
Be perceived? Does that work?
Well, maybe. Like, I want, like, I think it is defend this idea that I'm not silly or like hyper idealistic when talking to like my uncle or my grandparents or even sometimes my parents or like um different friends, like not you really, Kimmy, but like other friends who are like conservative, like being like, they're like, well, yeah, like that's cool and everything, but like the government shouldn't be the one doing like or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. I'm so I don't know. Like,
You feel like you're being rolled over, like
well, like
you're being
that
run over.
to be democratic for the reasons that I am is like too hyper idealistic and too like go with me here, but like snowflake like culture, you know? Like
Get over it,
just like everyone should love each other. Like everyone should just, bleh. Like, them dang liberals. So anyway,
One.
whereas I see it as like why is like caring for other people considered a bad thing? Like, um if it's not realistic, well, then why? How can we make it realistic? I agree that putting the government more in charge of everything might not be the best way to go, but like, could we? That doesn't mean we continue on with the systems that we do have in place where it just continues to emphasize the power structures that are already there. And like, could we mess with it a bit, And so that's where I'm coming from with more of a leaning towards like liberal ideas because I see them as slightly more humanitarian than Republican ideas. Um, but that is all very like big picture gist based. And you're like, wait, okay, but like still when I'm looking then, okay, so sorry, I know this, I'm like going on a tangent now. Well, I mean, that's what this whole podcast is. It's fine. So I was talking with my dad. Sorry, I'm going to jump into a story.
It's story time
So
with Claire.
remind me to talk about this a little bit more because my dad made a really interesting, like, me and Hannah had a really interesting debate about him not wanting to vote. Which, like,
Sorry,
that
there
was
was a
crazy.
spider.
There was a spider. Kill it.
I killed it already.
Good.
It's dead. It's gone.
It's a dead spider. Okay. So
He doesn't feel comfortable voting right now.
right. So like that's also like a part of it, and like I'll get into that because a couple of years ago I would have been like, how dare you? Like every voice must be heard, and honestly now I'm like, fair. Anyway.
Seriously, can we take a break from presidency for a little while?
And so anyway, yeah, because he just doesn't feel like being complicit in the system. But I was saying that I like understand, but I'm not quite ready to be like give up hope kind of thing. But anyway, he said something like criticizing during this conversation, criticizing like a democratic standpoint on abortion. So again, sorry about bringing up abortion so much. And I was like, okay, see, here you go. Like, this is not in an arguey way, but this was actually a really good discussion. I was like, okay, here's something where I'm like, I am pro-life and am very confident in admitting that, despite being more of a Democrat than a Republican, who are all Democrats are very pro-choice. Here's the thing, though. I'm pro-life, which means like which sort of means that I like emphasize some like more like liberal policies, like other liberal policies. See, I'm not doing a good job of this, but like healthcare, because I'm like, if we're going to
Accessible birth
say
control.
it's not really, yeah, like, do women have access to birth control? Do like it? I don't, because if we don't take care of people, like, there's a deeper rooted issue here. And so like, do adoption agencies actually get funding? Like, impoverished neighborhoods who are more likely to get abortions, like, do they have resources? Like, because like, and then when I say pro-life, I mean all pro-life, which means I am for immigrants, I'm for refugees, I'm for, you see what I mean? Like, it influences how I think about, like, I'm for disability, like helping disabled people. I couldn't figure out another way to say that. Like,
Well,
all of these different things, like, I am pro all life. And so that means that in these different like liberal policies, I'm not saying like every man for himself. I'm saying we have to be a part of like all of this, which means I agree, like, I end up being obviously in between. And so I feel like, because I feel like in both political parties, it's contradictory values within the
oh yeah,
party.
totally.
And so
100%.
I end up having to like pick and choose, and that's not right. Because of just like where my own values and morals enter the picture, what my beliefs are on certain policies. Because like, I agree with a lot of like environmentalist ideas as well, with this idea of like taking care of the earth, because like pro-life, you kind of see what I mean? Like, it's like, that's the way that I think about things because of the way I am. And I totally understand that there's like, I know there's arguments within all of that. So like, I'm not saying
But they're all, I mean,
I'm
there's
right, but
complexities in
like, but there's
everything.
complexity there. And that's what I believe. And I was like, kind of, I was saying that to my dad, and it was really interesting. Um, just sort of like these ideas of like the extreme left and right that we're like called to buy into, and how it really does end up like harming the system, to the point where my dad was just so like morally, like, he was morally struggling to like find a way out, which his conclusion in his mind was like, I don't think I can vote. And then he like brought it up to see how we would react. And my mom was like, don't agree with that. That's like, okay. You should definitely vote, and like said all these things because like, da, 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 da. And everything she said was correct. Um, but then like we kind of worked through it, and I like really thought about it, and I totally see where he was coming from. And also what we decided was that like, okay, maybe still vote, but like vote for who you want to be president. Like, vote for a third party, vote for whatever. Because if you're saying, well, my vote doesn't matter anyway, which, like, fair, then just go ahead and make your sort of like protesting statement by still voting, but voting for who you actually want. And so that's the conclusion we came to there. I'm not saying that everyone should do that, but for him, because of his morals, that's what the conclusion we reached.
Small suggestion.
Yes.
I haven't done a lot of research, but I know that Joe Jorgensen has gotten a lot of traction lately, and the policies that I have seen look really cool. So maybe you could
I
look
haven't
into
even
her.
heard of it. Yeah, that's also another thing, is that I do
She's third party.
disconnect, like hardcore from like the news, and I know that that's probably not a good thing, but it's mainly for my anxiety.
The only thing that I've
I don't do
seen
it.
like I've seen some stuff about some of her policies, but mainly it's just like people are like, we will meme her into office. And I'm like, I'm here for it.
Oh,
Can we meme her into
hell
office?
yes.
Because like she has some like really cool like her I'm some of the things that I look into are Second Amendment, and abortion is one that I'm really big on. Even though Republicans and Democrats, I don't really see much of a difference on that. I feel like it's just lip service. I feel like both sides, it's really just lip service where I'm saying what I know will make the people that I want to appease happy, which is very frustrating to me.
That's
because
such a divisive issue.
I know that many Republicans are, many of them are pro-choice, but they say they're pro-life because they know that they can get the older conservatives that way.
Yeah.
And I, like you, I'm pro-life, and I'm pro all life. Like, I'm adopted, so I'm very much like,
right.
There's other options. But here's the thing, though. The adoption system in the U.S. is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
The system for kids is horrible in the U.S. I'm all for immigration. I'm all for legal immigration, though. But the problem is, legal immigration is next to impossible. Yeah. They've created a system where it is not feasible. And these people are seeking asylum. They're trying. There are people that try to go the legal avenues, and it takes them 20 years.
Right. And also, I don't like the mentality of like, oh, don't come into our country. Dude, we're all immigrants. Like, what even is that?
And I'm like, and I see, and I like like the argument better. Of like, I like the argument of, we all immigrated here, with the exception of the Native Americans. But the argument that I don't like is all Americans are just murderers, and they stole this land, and they made those land deals, right? They went back on them, but the beginning of them was
right. No, for sure.
It's not like they came in and just. I mean, that's a completely different topic. I'm leaving it.
I know what you're saying though, but because like this idea of like, I believe there should still be continued reparations, and there are still atrocities that are committed against Native, like indigenous people. And so like, that's not cool. Like the idea that reservations are like impoverished is like insane to me. Like, what the heck? I thought we knew better at this point about like, they were here first, like dibs kind of thing. But I know what you mean in this idea of like, because I agree that like America was founded with like a whole lot of violence, and there was a lot of stuff going real bad. But
to be fair, most countries have.
Most countries are.
Founded that
That's
way.
Called a human problem, and that doesn't mean that like. I think by saying that it was all terrible, that for me, instead of as a way to like take responsibility, it almost seems like a way to put off responsibility of like current issues and put it on
blaming it on other people.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me with this idea of like, America sucked, therefore being like, okay, but true in some ways, but that doesn't mean that. But like, it's also, okay, what do we do now then? I don't really see how that's relevant.
It's dwelling too much on the past, but it's also looking into. I mean, it is literally in human nature to fight.
Look
at the Bible.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like we're like, America's not better than everybody else, and we're not worse than anybody else.
Worse than everybody else either. Like, everyone has their issues and conflict. Because if you look at it literally, like the third thing that's like in the Bible that's like a main event is Cain killing Abel.
It's like, woo.
So, I mean, conflict. Immediate conflict. It is in our nature. And while that doesn't make it right.
And also,
obviously.
I don't
it does not make
like
it right.
There is a whole lot of like the way that we're raised to like believe that like America is perfect in a lot of ways. Like, we there, I do see where some arguments are coming from, of being like, you got to look at history not through such rose-colored glasses, with this idea of like, America like saved everyone in World War II when we.
Oh, you went out. You're back. Wait. There we go.
Okay, I hit record again. Should I lay back down? It seemed to be working when I was doing it.
Maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna lay back down and hopefully nothing happens.
You're getting very movie.
Okay.
And so I think that's what's doing it, because you're shaking around and you're like waving your arms, which like fair.
I'm getting really passionate. Okay.
You're getting very passionate, which like good. I mean, and like quick side note, since we're doing this, like I want to make it clear, you know, we're touching on some really heavy stuff, but it's literally just, these are our opinions. We don't expect people to agree with us. We don't expect people to obviously like what we're saying. We're just putting our opinions out there, and we're just talking about them. And I want to reinforce the idea that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, whether they agree or disagree with it. Like, it doesn't, it's going back to the, just because you disagree does not mean you have to.
Yep. And like, I bet you anything that, like me and Kimmy don't even agree on everything either.
I'd say at least 70% of things we do not agree on.
I'll say something, and probably Kimmy's over there being like, and then she'll say something, and I'll be like, because you said, for example, just throwing it out there, you said, like you were talking about the Second Amendment, and like, I don't like guns at all, and so that's a whole like thing where you're like. I don't know where I stand on it, but I'm just saying, like, probably where we would end up would be different. Because we disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, I was raised around guns. I'm very comfortable with them. I was taught gun safety at a very young age. So, we lived out in the country. That was what we had
it's definitely
for protection.
Cultural thing. Not even in a bad way, is what I mean. Like, I mean, like, in a good way, like, culture.
It's the typical out in the country land. You got livestock, you got this, you're gonna have a couple of guns on the property
for sure,
for protection. Because we also didn't have a security system. Our donkey braying was our alert system.
No, for sure.
That's such a random thing to bring up. I'm sorry.
Yes, Kimmy owned a donkey growing up. Everybody.
I had a donkey. His name was Jack. I loved him. I didn't name him.
Can we,
for the record,
just sit with the name Jack of a donkey? Because, like, you all see the pun, right? Like,
so I don't remember exactly the context of why we got him. I think it was because we also had a few cows when I was growing up, and when we raised them to eat them. I'm sorry, but we did. And when the last cow that we had went to become our burgers, we needed something to go in our pasture because we had an acre of land. And so we got this donkey, and when we got him, his name was like Taco Paco Jack. I'm almost positive that I remember that's what the lady called him. And so we were like, we're not going to call him Taco Paco. That's kind of weird. And like someone latched on to Jack. And I was like 3 or 4 when we got him. So I'd like to point out that my sweet little innocent little child brain did not understand the pun until I was like 14.
And so when you told people that you had a donkey named Jack, why?
I was like, why are you laughing?
So
why are you laughing? Why are you laughing at his name? Like his name is Jack. He's a good donkey. We were not near the end. We realized that he's like, donkeys are kind of like goats, and like they'll eat anything that you give them, but they don't have the stomachs and like the systems of goats where they're like they can handle that. Because like a goat can like eat tinfoil and it'll be fine. A donkey cannot. And so he would like drink out of a cup like a human and all that stuff. He got diabetes. And then he died.
Oh dear.
It was sad.
Poor
I
Jack,
loved that donkey though. He was a very good donkey. Poor Jack. Our entire neighborhood hated us because he brayed like.
Where were we?
All right, back to the topic. Speaking of donkeys,
yes, exactly.
Because that's the
oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought that it was related. Holy crap, that's funny.
Just on the top, where did those come from? Because I love donkeys. Elephants are cool.
Literally have no idea. I feel like I learned about it maybe in school, but I got nothing.
Probably, but
Also,
it
the
probably wasn't like
progression, the
something
historical
that just stuck with you.
progression of like the parties and what it means, that is crazy.
Because also, what we call Democrats now were technically
Oh, I know.
Republicans like 40 years
It
ago
it
or
always
something like that.
just crazy. Like
It makes no sense.
the history of
I hate
that
it.
is just
I hate it
wild,
all.
which was why like I really think it's interesting, like the whole like identity that we have, like I'm conservative, I'm liberal, or I'm like progressive, or like whatever, like that those wouldn't even have the same like it's all new. Like we think about it as being like, oh no, I'm like classic or whatever, but it's like these are all new ideas, very new. Yeah.
And back on the topic of like what we identify as, I'm almost at the point where I'm borderline libertarian
Mm-hmm.
slash Republican because there are certain things that I still don't budge on, and and a lot of times it does come down to like
Mm-hmm.
abortion for
That's
me.
how my mom is.
Um, and it's frustrating because you say a lot of times people you because it's the same thing that you struggle with when you're talking to your conservative family members or friends. You were one of the first quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
liberals that I'd interacted with that didn't immediately
Mm-hmm.
make me feel uncomfortable
That
and
wasn't a
unsafe to
butthole
voice my
about it.
opinion.
Maybe I'm a little bit of a
Yeah,
butthole. That's
because
okay.
but you are in the sense of you don't ever make me feel like you are disrespecting me or being hateful
Oh my
towards me. And
gosh,
I hope I
yeah.
don't do that to
I
you.
completely agree.
Because I remember very specifically week 1 or 2 of grad school. I went to First Friday Art Trail here in town with a few friends, and I remember very specifically a couple of them, like people always bring their dogs and stuff to First Friday. It's super cute. And this guy had his dog, and my friends were like, "Oh, what a cute dog!" But the guy was wearing a MAGA hat, and they're like, "The dog isn't cute anymore." And like we got really serious and like walked away. And I was sitting there going, "Well, understandable that you don't like the guy's political views. I feel like it's very extreme to just immediately start hating him.
Mm-hmm.
While I don't like the idea of wearing anything to support your
Yeah,
party
that's weird.
personally, because I feel like at this point in this day and age, it is a specific I want to
Yeah,
shove it in your
it's a
face,
choice.
and I'm not okay with that. But I'm also not okay with the immediate from people who say we need to be open and we need to understand and we need to listen to other people's point of view. It's very hypocritical to immediately see someone who obviously has a different political view and go, "Oh, I don't want to associate with them." Because you cannot just live in an echo chamber. It's not productive. You don't grow as a
Mm-hmm.
person. You just fall deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole. And I realized that that was becoming a problem for me a couple of years ago, right before grad school. And then I got into grad school and it was kind of like the exact opposite.
Mm.
But also surrounding yourself only with people that disagree with you is exhausting
Yeah,
and not healthy.
you need sort of common ground. Always, like you need to be able to like trust people and have people in your life that understand you.
And the mutual respect is
Because
vital.
like
It's absolutely vital.
I think this is how I feel with this idea of like, because I have a lot of conservatives in my life that are very gracious towards me. But I'm thinking about specifically you with like just this idea that like you like me as a person, you know? Like you think that I am nice and funny. Just there we go. And that's like established because I'm a human and I'm Claire and you see me and you don't just see my political beliefs and you don't just associate that as like who I am, and that like, oh, you could never like see eye to eye with me because of that, or like that you think that I'm stupid. You don't think I'm stupid, you think I'm smart. You don't think I'm crazy. You think I'm like nice, you know?
Let's go back. I do think you're crazy, but in a completely different way.
Right.
We are both crazy.
And I know, like, you definitely think I'm crazy. You definitely think I'm like,
but in the best way.
But like, because like we care about each other. And that I think is just so important to realize that, like, so I think that probably it's the same way, is that you know that I like you, Kimmy, as a person, and that I understand where you're coming from, and I understand also that you understand where you're coming from, and how much of like that, like, our culture and our upbringing influences the way that we believe things, and how important that is, and not something to be disregarded as being like, oh, well, like, if they just saw it my way, like, they would be smart. But until then, they're stupid. That is so insulting to people's experiences.
And I think the mindset of, oh, they're just uneducated, let me educate them, is a wholly flawed idea, and just throw it out the window. And also the idea, there's just so many things, because I get so tired of hostility. Tyler has been going through a lot lately, and he's just been very grumpy, and going through. And the other day he was apologizing, and I was like, I'm not upset with you for being grumpy and being upset. I'm worried about you. Because as someone who has spent, especially in my teenage years and even in recent years, a lot of time angry and bitter and grumpy, it is incredibly exhausting. It drains you, and it makes life just so much harder than it needs to be. And I'm not saying that it's your own fault if you're that way, but it's just realizing that, hey, this anger, this hatred that I have takes up so much of me that it's taking away from my life. It's taking away from what I could enjoy. And it's giving other people way too much power over who I am as a person. Does that make sense? Is that like too
legit?
Is that like too far? Because I see that, and I see stuff on people on social media going like, everyone must be angry about this. It's not right. It's an injustice. So we must all be angry. It's like trying to force other people to be angry is just not okay.
Anger is very exhausting.
And some people don't have the mental capacity for that.
Okay, this is really cool. One of our professors, Dr. Gertie's, that's what I'm talking about. She's
oh my
so
gosh.
Cool.
Shout out Dr. Gertie's.
First time I ever had her was in undergrad. And it was right after the election to 2016. I was in her class for that. I think she has very negative memories of that whole semester.
I think most people do. No matter what side you're on. I think no matter what side you're on.
Class, there were a whole bunch of like, they were all like business majors, like accounting, and they were all white guys.
There's a type.
No, like I'm not trying to like a trip, but like I'm just trying to give you the vibe of this class, okay?
She's profiling is what she's doing right now.
That was actually what it was. So there was like, and they sat on one edge of the room, and like all the girls sat on the other side, and like one gay guy. And this was our situation. So do you sort of see the like tension?
I can picture it in my head. I feel like I can picture the exact classroom too, because there's only like 5.
Was trying to like, yes, and it was her first semester teaching at Tech.
Oh yeah, because that was her first semester
at Tech.
Oh my god.
And then the election happened, and it was
made it even worse
for the professor. Like, it was very upsetting, the result. She was not a fan of Trump, because she and her wife were like really just like worried, because being gay, they were like, oh no, this is horrible, like we live in Texas, like all, like there was just so much fear, and I think justifiably so. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so she sort of had us like all sort of like write out our thoughts and feelings. Not in like a, but just sort of to process for a second. Like, tell me how you
Tell
feel.
me
And
how
like, we
you
didn't have to
feel.
like do anything with it. And then she also said, like, as like a second sort of prompt, like, write out like where you're at, just like get it out of your head and onto paper. And then as a second thing, like, write how those things might transfer into action. Like, what could you actually do? Like, if you're upset about the result, like, could you then maybe like think about different community organizations that you could help out, or like just different, like, is there something you can do or should do, or a feeling like that, like, is there an action, which I just think is really productive. Then after we did that, she was like, okay, now like I'm down for like having like a discussion, but if you don't want to, like, you can leave. And she basically like gave people permission to like not participate if they didn't want to, if it wasn't going to be helpful for them. So all the guys got up and left, but except for a couple of people. um and then I remember what I wrote was like, I am so tired. Like, I'm so tired. I'm really tired. I find anger to be exhausting, and I don't really want to be angry, and I don't really want to be around anger, though I do understand it in many cases. And that I'm just really tired, but I think I want to listen to like a bunch of different people. And I think that's what I want to do. Like, my action was listening. Um and so, cuz like I like my parents voted for Trump, and I like the different, like, everyone's perspective was so unique in that situation. It was not as black and white as like, I like Trump, let me vote for Trump. I like Hillary Clinton, let me vote for her. Like, it was so much more complicated than that.
It was definitely
Everyone
not.
has a story, everyone has a voice. And so, for example, Dr. Grody's voice, like, I wanted to know what it felt like to be her, and I wanted to know what it felt like to be the girl sitting next to me, and I wanted to know what my parents felt like, because they both felt different than even each other, even though there was the same result when they voted. And you're like, it's so complicated. It is not black and white. It is not Republican versus Democrat. We are all human, and the experiences that we have influence our choices and influence the result that is then presented to like the whole nation, and then therefore to the world, in terms of representing what America is for that time period. And like, that's really hard, because one person becomes like the figurehead, and like one party becomes like the figurehead, and you're like, there you're like, that's not me though, like, I hope that makes sense. That was a little vague. Mm-hmm.
No, it makes total sense. No, it makes total sense because it goes back to the whole identity and associating your entire identity with one party and associating your entire,
Yeah,
and I don't think that's
we
right.
can't find meaning
And I
from
saw
just that.
something,
We can't. You'll go crazy.
and I saw something the other day, and I actually just added to our list of approaching, political issues with a Christian-like attitude and as Christians, because I saw something the other day that was like, patriotism is important. I think caring about the country and people is important. I think those are true. The Bible says we should obey the laws of the land unless they go against what the Bible tells us. Unless those laws. So patriotism should never overtake our Christianity, though. And I think a lot of people forget
or conflate
that.
the two, which is so
They
weird.
think that, exactly, they think that being a patriot means that they're being a good Christian. When in reality, there are things that go on that are not. That's just not how it is.
God
like,
in America.
There are
like,
things,
and that's, you're like,
you can love both of those things, but they don't equal each other, and they don't. And there's the whole thing of separation in church and state, and people being really upset that we're getting rid of church and Bible and all of these things, but they did not. Let's be real. First century Christians did not have all of that stuff. They were not teaching the Bible in school, primarily because part of it hadn't been written yet. But it's also, I mean, they were being searched and killed in their homes because that was just that was how it, which again, back to conflict and humans.
Yeah. And like, if we're talking historically also, like, when, you know, our perception of how when God and like all of that stuff was really present within like our national system. I mean, also way back in our national system was slavery. So like, I don't think, you know, which, and was then and like,
it's going back to that
emphasized. People said that the Bible like supported it. And you're like, how did we get it so wrong? Yeah.
But it's going back to the whole thing that, and it's going into more of like spiritual debate here. But if you look at the Old Testament, God allowed people to be in power when his people did something that he didn't like. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that that's always what's happening, but it rains on the just and the unjust, right? Like, certain things are not just punishment, but they're also not, it doesn't mean that that's, oh, this is God's will.
Right.
You know, this is what God wants for us. Because, and there are things that God tolerated in the Old Testament that in the New Testament, he was like, nah, no more. We're not doing this anymore. One that I can think of specifically was polygamy. I think there's been a lot of arguments that he tolerated it in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, he was like, husband to one wife. Bruh. No more. Like, no getting harems. Right. That's not cool. And it's just, where was I going? Because I've got so many thoughts inside my head about all of this, because I think something that is so important is when you look at it, it's not just about left versus right, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. It's about doing what's right in God's eyes.
As a Christian, that's like all we're called to.
Exactly. And if we're being real, there are aspects to both sides that are not okay.
My dad talks about this a lot, about like politics being the new God.
Oh my gosh, but he's so right.
Which I think is fascinating.
Because it becomes this thing where if you're a Republican, oh, will you support all cops just killing people? I'm like, no, I don't. But I also do know.
No, and also your dad's a firefighter, so you're like, you are.
Yeah, I've known so many cops that were wonderful people. There are cops that are horrible people. But they're people. And that's the problem. Like, I have met cops who are not good people, but I also like with law enforcement and firefighters and stuff like that. It's weird because it's kind of like distant cousins.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
If that makes sense. They look out for each other. Like, they kind of hate each other. There's like that rivalry. But like, they look out for each other. And my dad has been a fireman. My mom and I were actually talking about that this earlier today. He's been a fireman for almost 30 years. It's just part of who we are. When I was 16, I got into a wreck that totaled my car. And the firemen that showed up and the police that showed up, they knew me. And they looked after me. And they kept me safe until my dad got there. And they're kind people. Tyler got pulled over a couple of weeks ago for going very fast.
He drives like a maniac, so maybe that was why.
He's actually gotten much better than that one time that you rode with us. In all fairness, in all fairness, he has. And he didn't realize he was speeding, actually, because he had turned around to go. We had passed the place we wanted to eat at.
Yeah, that's a different mentality.
Going in between places, so and he had turned around and he was trying to not be in people's way. And we got pulled over, and the cop was so nice. Obviously, but here's the thing too. I see this right now in the climate we're in. Everyone is scared. Everyone is scared, except for the people who are the aggressors. The only people who are not
Well,
scared are the
maybe
aggressors.
even them, because
And
like
even then
fear can
sometimes they
manifest
are.
itself as anger and aggression. And so like,
That's very true.
but I think that because we're all scared, we have to be careful with fear manifesting itself as anger and aggression, because that I think in some cases maybe it can be productive. Like, I'm not anti-protest, for example, but like you kind of go with me. You know what I mean? Like, but for the most part, like in terms of thinking about divisiveness, which is I think like a big theme when thinking and talking about the two-party system, is like divisiveness. If we're trying to like lessen that, I think that anger and aggression is not necessarily the way to go. I think it's justifiable, but I don't think it's the way to go.
I think like most things in moderation, it
Mm,
can be healthy. It can drive you
smart.
forward, it can drive you into action. But it's that line, and fear the same way, right? It's that line of not letting it completely
Hmm.
consume you.
To where you're could be paralyzed by
Because
it or end up resorting to like violence, which I'm not gonna be on board with, kind of no matter how you swing it, even if I do understand why it's happening.
yeah, because I mean, there's cops that are good people, but then you also see
Hmm.
in certain places right now
And
they're just out of
how like
control.
if like the idea of a debate being brought up about like the systems that are in place that sort of perpetuate like wrong stuff happening. You're like, okay, so cops are humans, all different types, as all things are. But like, okay, then the debate opens up about like, okay, there's these systems. Then there's the way that things are trained. There's different like areas and cities. How do we think about that? Like all of that becomes like a part of the debate, instead of just simply lessening it to like f the cop.
It's so complicated right now, and it gets exhausting, especially when you think about how you feel like the division isn't going to
Yeah.
come to an end anytime soon.
Yep.
And it's
So that's
scary
why it's easy to get
because
discontented or like feel really off with the system. Yeah.
jaded or
Like I
just
talked
really
about with
angry
my
and
dad
scared.
being just like, I don't know how to engage with this in a way that like would align with like my morals. And I'm like, honestly,
Because it's just so
fair.
complicated.
So we can only do the best that we can do. That's all. We can only do what we can do. We can only
Um,
try and do the right thing. We can only try and just listen as much as possible to other people and make our choices as we go along. That's all we can do. Yeah.
really.
Mhm.
And it starts with us, right? It's the little things of just being
Mhm.
kind, like just being a nice person. It sometimes it takes a lot of mental
Mhm.
effort, let's be real. Like when you're having a bad day, when you're really anxious, when you're really, let's not lie to ourselves and
Mhm.
say that it's super easy. But a simple smile or a kind word can go
Yep.
miles. It can do so much because it's just knowing someone disagrees with you and doesn't
Yep.
hate you is a huge
I
thing.
love it.
And you are one of my favorite people to talk to
Yes.
simply because of that.
Yes.
Because I
You
know
can
I'm
say
safe. I know I'm
whatever you
comfortable.
want,
I know
and I will still love you.
exactly. And we might disagree with each other, and we might call people like each
Mhm.
other
Oh yeah.
jokingly dumb,
Oh,
but
I'm
we would
dumb. Like I
never.
admit it. I'm a freaking idiot. And also, I'm sorry if I got like at any point like too passionate about anything. I really, I'm also like in a weird mood, so I might, yeah.
No, but that's what makes
So,
this fun. Because we're not doing this just
hmm,
to make
or
people
yeah,
happy or whatever.
yes.
We're
And
doing this because
any
it's fun.
listeners, if I did say anything that offended you, um, I am honestly sorry. I don't mean to, but like Kimmy said earlier, like, uh, it's just our opinion. That's it. Just mine. I'm not claiming
It doesn't mean that
that
we think
anyone is a bad person.
It doesn't mean we think that anyone thinks who thinks differently than us. Like,
yeah, I
screw you.
I don't think that.
You're
I do
wrong.
not
No,
at all.
it's definitely not true.
Yeah, we are.
We're about an hour. We're gonna wrap it up here.
Woo.
Thank y'all for listening. Let us know your thoughts. This is a huge topic right now. This is huge.
Oh God, yes.
November's right around the corner. Everyone is. I'm sorry, just how I feel about that is just vomit. But I really enjoyed this one today. This was fun. I really like these kinds that are kind of in a way heavy, because we both get really passionate, but they also bring up so many other issues that we can go into, because I think this is a great segue into a couple of other issues that we were thinking about talking about today that we can do later. But thanks for listening. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.